The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Sandy Edge. He was born on November 9th, 1949. He served in the Air Force during Desert Shield Desert Storm. He achieved the rank of colonel, and we are recording this on April 17th, 2013. I'm William Richter, and I'm conducting the interview. No relation. Thank you, Colonel, for taking the time to sit down with us and do the interview for the Veterans History Project.
Thank you for asking. It's my privilege to do it.
Appreciate it. Colonel, if you could go over where and when you were born.
Well, born on November 9th, 1949, down near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which is near Conway, but really it's Wampy Little River. Went to Wampy Little River High School. And I always remembered about my childhood to try to stay grounded and remember whence I came.
Mm-hmm.
Born and raised on a tobacco farm. Usually, most of the time, a tobacco stick followed me around where I went, and I kind of kept it in the corner of the office at all times to kind of remember what my roots were. Early on in my young adult life, my agricultural teacher at Clemson, at Wampy Little River High School, decided to bring me to a place called Clemson University. And I came up for a football game, and that's where I was first introduced to Clemson University.
Okay. And Colonel, could you elaborate on your family, your what your parents did, how many siblings you had?
Be glad to. The hero of my life was my father, W.B. Edge, who served in World War II in the Navy. Mother was always there for me, and matter of fact, to this day is still there at the wonderful age of 89. She always took care of the three of us. There are three children. I'm the oldest and the best looking. And then I have 2 years younger my brother and 5 years younger my sister. We born and raised on a farm, lived down a dirt road. Mom still lives down the dirt road. And family life on the farm was kind of what I got used to.
All right. And do you want to talk about your younger years before you entered the service? What were you doing? What did you enjoy?
Well, I always enjoyed sports. I always enjoyed anything that cheerleading, being a champion for something. Probably always got into a little bit of trouble. Nothing really anything serious, but I always liked to be out doing something. I tried to lead by example even at an early age, and I tried to remember the fact that I was the oldest sibling in the family. I always felt that that maybe something I could do would impact my younger brother, my younger sister. But I always wanted to never let my mother and my father down because I thought so much of them.
That's great. Talk about your dad. You said he served in the military during World War II. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, my father, in our immediate family, was the first one that ever actually served in the military. He decided to go into the Navy. There were actually 5 of his brothers, I believe, and many of which, maybe all but one, were in the military at one point in time. But he went into the Navy. He served on a landing craft that carried some of the soldiers and other folks sometimes in the landing positions. Was in Hawaii. Served at an area in Hawaii called West Loch, where they were actually training for a possible invasion of Japan. He was wounded there. He was just my hero. He gave me some advice when I came into the military many years ago. He said, "Son, never asked you men to do anything you wouldn't do." And I remember the time that Dad told me on one particular occasion he got blown out of 3 different ships, but managed to find his way back. After the war, he would not talk a lot about the war, and if you messed with any fire or had anything to do with fire around him, you got his attention. And he didn't like stewed beef. I guess they must have ate a lot of stewed beef back in those days.
I understand that. So, Colonel, tell us why you chose the Air Force, how you got into the military.
Well, at the time when I came to Clemson in 1968, you had to take at least 2 years of ROTC.
Okay.
I had never any idea that I was going to be in the military for any extended period of time, unless I had gotten drafted. About that time, Vietnam was going on, and my draft number, I'll never forget, was number 13, which most of the time has been my lucky number. I felt like I would get drafted. I remember one day when I showed up at Clemson, I got into the Air Force line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I got in the Air Force line versus the Army line. Maybe the thought was that I would fly at some point. But for the first 2 years, I took ROTC. It was mandatory. I actually got in it, enjoyed it. And I discovered the fact that maybe in some ways, if it meant going into the military for 4 years, if I could get a scholarship to help offset the expenses of my parents for the Clemson education, I would do that. And if it meant going in to serve for a little while, I could probably do 4 years, no problem, and serve in the United States Air Force.
That's great. Talk about your time at Clemson. What was that like?
It was a hoot. My time at Clemson was actually a rat season then, and my hair was actually a little shorter then than it is now. Most of it did not grow back, but we actually had rat caps. We actually shaved our head. The rivalry between Clemson and Carolina was something I'll always remember and still do. A lot of passion, a lot of things that the freshman rat class did. There were very few co-eds at Clemson when I got here, and 55 was the first co-eds, but it wasn't a lot better in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
Very rigid life. You pretty much, your academic advising was, here's your list of courses, have a nice day, this is where you need to be, and we salute smartly and did kind of what we're told.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not a service of cadets and getting up early and all that, but the Corps was still pretty large at that period of time.
Okay. And talk a little bit about your time with ROTC there. What kind of things did you do?
Well, actually, in ROTC initially, I did a little flying work and thought that maybe I would be a pilot, and actually soloed out at the Oconee County Airport right outside the campus there in a little Cessna. I'll never forget the feeling the first time I soloed. I have 5 hours of solo in a Cessna. And you haven't lived until you look over in an airplane and there's no one in the airplane but yourself, and you hope that you can land that sucker and get down in one piece, and we did. But did 5 hours of solo, kept getting airsick. Don't know why, kept getting airsick, but enjoyed it. Did a lot of stuff. I was involved in Arnold Air. I was one of the commanders on one of the 2 days for Air Force ROTC. I poured myself into it. It was not that I was involved in a fraternity or anything, but that was my life. Mm-hmm. And after my brief stint in soloing, it was decided, and I decided that the Air Police or Security Forces, Security Police was the career field I would eventually go into.
Okay. And talk about getting into that, your training, where did you go for that, where did life take you?
Well, it took me a long ways from Wampy Little River, South Carolina. And when I first went into the Air Force, I had felt for sure I'd go to Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina.
Okay.
And nope, I found out very quickly that the needs of the United States Air Force come first. And I discovered there was a place in Michigan called the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Okay.
And they had snow there. And so it was my first assignment. It was the Security Forces assignment in Michigan. And my plan was to go there, do my duty, and get out. It was even though it was in the Upper Peninsula, they fished through holes in the ice. They drove cars out on a lake, which just freaked me out. But you always try to make the best of every situation you've been given. And so that was my first duty location, was at a place called Kinslow Air Force Base, Michigan.
And what was an average day like for you? What did you do on your average day?
Well, for the first 2 years, my average day was night. I worked midnight shift, and it took a little bit of me getting used to, but I'd work at night, and I'd try to sleep some during the daytime. But basically, I was assigned to a Security Forces squadron, and I was a shift commander for my first 2-3 years. We had a tremendous mission in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We guarded at the time nuclear weapons and B-52 bombers, and I remember the feeling the first time I ever went out into the storage area, and when we would do convoys involving those weapons, and all that I knew about the history and heritage of World War II, and to be standing in the vicinity of some weapon like that just was an overpowering thought and a tremendous responsibility to try to secure that. Michigan was probably where I cut my teeth and learned how to be a lieutenant and learn my job to the best of my ability and give 100% every day. Mm-hmm. My first boss was a guy that demanded a lot of me. And as it turned out, I didn't think so at the time, but it was a good thing. I enjoyed police work. Michigan left an impact on me because it was the first time that I ever had someone die in my arms. And I was out late one night on a shift and had gotten a call that there was a situation going on, and it really was about 2 blocks over from where I was in my police car out that night with my shift. And I got there, I was one of the first ones on the scene, and it was a young man who appearances was that he committed suicide. And when I got there, he had not passed yet, and tried to help in any way I could. And it just made a big impact on me that a young person was in such shape that he felt like the answer was to take his own life. We tried everything we could and couldn't save him. He was on the phone with his girlfriend, and he'd mentioned earlier that he had drawn down a bead on a police car that had just passed by the house, but couldn't get a good sight picture on it, and made me think a little bit because I was in that police car. But the impact there of being the first on the scene, and when someone needs a police officer, and being there when in that kind of situation left a tremendous impression on me that impacted me even later when I did and was called to Desert Shield Desert Storm.
I can only imagine. So talk about after Michigan. Where did you go after Michigan? Did you have any more training?
Well, I decided after Michigan and after doing a Northern Tier Strategic Air Command nuclear mission that maybe I would try to go try something else. One of my sons was actually born in Michigan, and my first son. And I ended up in a place called Zaragoza, Spain. And it was my first assignment overseas, and I was a chief of police on a base there that had a large flying mission where fighter pilots and aircraft would come in and practice throughout Europe. Learned a lot about international life. Second son born in Spain. Learned a little bit about the traditions and heritage of Spain. Jumped in the ring with a little bull a time or two. Sorry I did that, but that was an experience. A little bit of wine may have been involved there. But I learned a lot about going to another country, experiencing the fact outside of my comfort zone. Spain is a long ways from Wampy, Little River, South Carolina. And for an American to be in another country, it was one of the experiences and an educational thing that I never learned at Clemson. And I learned then it left a warm spot in my heart for international students and other folks today that come visit both here at Clemson and in our country to try to reach out to them and provide support, because it's a little unusual to get out of your comfort zone and go live in another country.
Definitely. Talk about the reception by Spanish locals of you, an American, in their territory. What was that like?
Well, at the time, I think it was about 77 when I showed up there, very, very supportive of Americans. Maybe some of it could have been for the economic impact, but I'll never forget Leo was my gentleman who was my translator. Mm-hmm. But they loved the military, they loved police officers. Mm-hmm. And with me being a military chief of police at that base, it was a home run. Got invited to all the bullfighting events, set in some nice places, and went to soccer games, and it was just really, really a great, cordial affair of where we tried very hard not to have any Americans bring discredit upon our country, mm-hmm. and that we treated just the Spanish folk with respect because we were in their country. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Okay. And circling back real quick before you get far from it, could you are you able to talk about your the nuclear mission that you mentioned in Michigan, guarding that? Are you able to talk about that?
I can talk about that a little bit. That base has since closed. It's now a prison camp, and I may go back there again one day. You never know. But it was a different mission then. We had something called Yellow Pages. They're called SAC Yellow Pages, and it was pretty much it was only Yellow Pages, and you did it or you didn't do it. So obviously you took a lot of precautions. You really watched your security. Those were at the time and probably still are very important assets. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want to lose one. and you wouldn't want one to get in the wrong hands and not have any accidents with it. So it was very much a straight-laced. You didn't stray, one way or the other. There was no rule left for interpretation. And anytime we moved weapons of that nature, we were very, very careful. A lot of security. Never any questions. Security was a top priority.
Okay. And what was it like? I'm sure there's a lot of secrecy with moving those weapons. What was it like? Were you separated from family, not being able to talk to them? What was that like?
Well, there was some of that, obviously. Being a police officer too, you really didn't spend a lot of time talking about, how your shift was that day, who got arrested, what they got arrested for. You kind of safeguarded even the information that we would collect on any arrest that we would do. So even at that level, much less to talk in any nature about any kind of we had a law enforcement mission and a security mission, and the security mission within the Strategic Air Command at that point was very, 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 very strict, and it's just something you just didn't talk about. And if you made a mistake, you were gone. There was never a redo. And my wife knew that when I went out and went to work, I might come back in 8 hours, I might come back in 10 hours, I might come back in 12 hours, but that it was very, very important, and it was one of those missions in the Air Force that had a very high priority mission.
And did you encounter any say attacks or anybody trespassing, trying to get information or access to any of these weapons?
Never had that situation. We had so many layers at that period of time. There were certain things called two-man policy. Never anyone, I don't care who you were, was ever allowed by yourself, but at least we had many, many layers of security, and that was just something you did not want to think about happening under your watch.
Definitely.
So I'm pleased to say, with the caliber of the young men and women we had, and what I suspect are still out there today and serving in our military, we took it very seriously.
Okay, great. So we left off beforehand with Spain. Do you want to touch anything else on there?
No, I just tried at Spain. Sometimes you feel like you're disconnected from the Air Force and you're out in a different part of the world, and maybe nobody's keeping up with whoever in the heck Sandy Edge is, but you just try to do your job to the best of your ability. It was certainly a different job than moving from a Northern Tier nuclear mission to one that was where you kind of kept up with fighter pilots and airplanes and some of the shenanigans that went on there, but you always tried to do the best job there. And sooner or later, somebody came through and happened to remember Captain Edge, and then my next assignment came up.
Okay, and so talk about. I remember you mentioned bull runs and stuff. What did you do for recreation there?
Well, I went to see a lot of soccer matches. I went to a lot of bullfighting events. There were always things going on there that had a lot of interaction with the base and the community. Played a lot of intramural sports. You had to be careful because in Spain, a lot of times during the day, you'd get invited to a Spanish luncheon, and wine was usually served, and that wine was, it pretty strong stuff. So you had to kind of watch that, and that may have been one of the afternoons that somehow that bull thing got involved. But tremendous traditions over there, and I was a lot younger then than I was now, so I may have taken a few more chances than I certainly would now.
Great. And okay, let's move on to your next assignment.
Yeah, let's leave the bulls alone and let's move
on. So where did you go after Spain? What?
After Spain, I went to Norton Air Force Base, California.
Okay.
Where I'd learned that there was something there called the Air Force Inspection and Safety Center.
Okay.
And it really was really kind of neat as a captain to go to the Air Force Inspection Safety Center. Felt my first earthquake in California. Actually had a chance to travel many, many places in the world to visit all kinds of bases, joint military operations, communication sites in Greece, and I mean just all over the world. And went in to visit and take a look at practices and procedures and how people protected various kinds of resources and offered any kind of explanations or recommendations that I would have. As a captain, it was a little bit overwhelming. We had checklists and we had things to do, and I was certainly one of a large team, but it was a tremendous opportunity at such a young age, and in my military career, starting to think at that point maybe I'd make it a military career as a young officer, to be able to go around, extract good ideas, throw out the old ideas, and kind of build and modify who I thought I would be one day if I ever had the privilege of commanding. Great opportunity.
And you mentioned that you went around to a lot of different places. What was your favorite?
Probably my favorite, and probably the most on edge or most uneasy I felt, was actually to go to Greece and look at some of the sites that I didn't even know were in existence back in the day. But there are many locations that are very isolated and out in various locations, and you just never take anything for granted. Being an old security forces officer that spent a lot of his time at Lackland Air Force Base in a place called Camp Bullis, and doing ground defense force stuff, which was kind of the Army side of me. I liked getting dirty. I liked going out and playing in the dirt a little bit. You had that thing in the back of your mind that you always really had to maintain your security and control of yourself. And some of those places that we went into in isolation was just you really put a lot of faith in the host nation security forces that were with you. I remember Italy. Italy was a great place to visit. But it was just probably some of the international places we went into and visited.
Talk a little bit. You mentioned Italy. Talk about what you did there and the kind of locations that you were at.
Well, what we did basically in Italy, and in some cases in Germany, we looked at some of our joint military locations. We looked at things like evacuation procedures. We looked at things like host nation support. We looked at things like what host nation international and laws were in effect. We looked at care and location and safety of dependent students and family members that were there. Was it a place that was suitable for perhaps an accompanied assignment where your family got to go, or was it a place that maybe just the service member had to go? But from my perspective, as a part of the security team, how secure was the facility? What support were they getting from their host base? Was our service providing them all the support they needed, and those kinds of things.
Okay, great. And what was like? How was it to adjust to each of these new countries every time? I know every time I'm sure the culture was different. How was that for you, going through multiple different cultures and having to adapt?
A bigger shock at the beginning than it was toward the end, but even then we spent a lot of time on host nation culture, on orientation, how to treat various cultures with respect, how to recognize the fact that you are in fact visitors in their country. And so it was something that we did not want to cause embarrassment for a nation that had agreed and offered us an opportunity to go in and help them with security or help them with world security. So early on it was a little bit of a shock. The language barrier was usually an issue. But once we put more interest into culture, being a little more prepared, we actually took some international folks with us as well. Really, getting through all the time zones and all that when you're a little bit younger is a lot easier then. But I joined the military to travel. I joined the military to see something size Wampy and Horry County, and boy, did I see a lot of that. And so it was just a tremendous rush every time we went somewhere new.
And could you talk a little bit about your living accommodations, the food, social life, that kind of thing as you move from location to location?
Well, living accommodations a lot of times would vary according to your rank and where you were, and sometimes what was offered at a facility. My family background, we were not a very, we had what we needed, but we didn't have anything more than what we needed. So I was used to a very a life that didn't have a lot of excess, and worked hard. And I never really had any kind of problem with any of my billeting arrangements or food. I could just about eat anything and still do today. But I knew that we had brothers and sisters in the Army. I knew that we had folks, when I looked at some of the national countries that we went into and the living standards, I was always taught to be thankful for what you had. And even on my worst day, and whether it was food or billeting, I was still blessed. And so in order for you to, I think, adapt and do well in those kind of environments, you have to be flexible. You have to be flexible.
And when you were over in Europe, did you ever have to deal with any diplomats coming in to the area, securing anything like that?
We did, and we usually got very good backing. And usually in most of the areas, I just had the privilege of where it was either all black or white when you deal with did you or did you not. And both from dignitaries that were visiting, or even very high-ranking folks that lived on your facility or whatever, everyone accepted the fact that security was security. They may not have appreciated it at times or during the day when nothing happened, but there are several times I can think of that, boy, a security person couldn't get there fast enough. Yeah. So never had that big of a problem. There were always folks that sometimes never had to buy a drink at the officers club. Everybody wanted to be your buddy. Didn't participate in very much of that because you had to kind of walk straight and narrow as a cop yourself. Never had any kind of problem. I was always blessed to be able to try to figure out how to make the best of a situation and somehow find a compromise. And I think in just about every time I can think of the support I received, I had great bosses. Great bosses. If you do the right thing, you'll be all right.
Okay. So, moving forward, where did life take you after that?
Well, after the Air Force Inspection and Safety Center in California, Dayton, Ohio, Sinus Valley, up near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And very interesting job working with, by now I had worked in about 3 or 4 different major commands, which I thought branching out and going to different commands was important, not to get stuck in one command. And I got to test, break, build, design new cop equipment. What a hoot. Flashlights, helmets, riot gear. I'd go to all kinds of equipment displays and shows, body armor, weaponry, ammo. We would test new things coming out, tasers, all kinds of things. And I always was a person that was always curious about things. So at the Air Force Center at Wright-Patterson that designed, we worked with a lot of engineers. We always needed the latest equipment out there, night vision and those kind of things. To go into that world of designing, finding out the need, and testing equipment was another thing I enjoyed.
And did you have like a favorite piece of equipment, maybe a couple that you thought were really cool that interested you?
One thing I remember was a riot control helmet, and it was a blue helmet and had a shield on it. And the testing was not that exciting, but they'd throw things on you. There'd all kinds of liquids, all kinds of substances, and it had to shield you from liquids or objects and various things. But putting on a helmet and let somebody hit you in the head with something you didn't do that every day. But that was, I thought, to try to find something that would protect our security forces whenever we responded to disturbances, I thought was kind of a neat thing to do, and to beat up a helmet and to get to model that, and probably some cases may still be the same helmet that's out there today, but I remember the riot helmet. That was kind of cool.
And they didn't hit you too hard, did they?
Not too hard, not that many times. Not that many times.
Okay, good. So what else did you do with that position? What was your interaction like with the different suppliers of these?
Well, you had an opportunity to get a lot of freebies if you wanted them, because there were obviously a lot of flashlights and a lot of things that the military stood to buy. A lot of my interaction at that new assignment, even though I had been at the Air Force Inspection Safety Center, was at the Air Force Logistics Command. I got to be in closer environment with general officers and with a major command leadership team. And I had to learn a little bit more about the political correctness and really there. I remember one thing I'll never forget, sitting at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I was in the barber chair and Challenger, spaceship Challenger blew up. That was another big thing I remembered from there. And it was like, wow, that just happened. It came natural that we did those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I learned a little bit more about the bigger picture of the Air Force at the Air Force inspection, at the Air Force Logistics Command, and I learned about the side of that, the Air Force, in that it takes a lot of work to get equipment and supplies, and that's another piece of the Air Force or any service that you don't think a lot about. But I learned to deal with general officers in a little bit a closer environment there. And that took a little bit of training for me to do, but I somehow figured out how to get by in that regard too.
Good. So with going back to the Challenger explosion, what was the response like in the military, and especially in the Air Force when that happened? What was going through everyone's mind? Well,
it was really a shock. I mean, everybody just assumed that you launched it, it went up, they did their thing, they came back. McNair, one of the astronauts, McNair, was from South Carolina, and somewhere I have in my office a little patch display, or down in the house or the office, I keep rotating it, a little patch display from that, and it was, I think, also the mission which was a teacher in space, and my major at Clemson was education. So there were a couple of things there that really hit me personally. Was that there was a South Carolinian on the shuttle, and also a teacher, and it just taught everybody. It was like, if you relax and take everything as routine, something can happen. And in that kind of environment, things can always be dangerous. You just have to be take nothing for granted. Sometimes accidents do happen, but it just taught us to never take anything for granted.
Definitely. So let's move forward. After the logistics side of things, where did you go?
Well, I started getting a little closer back to South Carolina, and there was a base within the Air Force Logistics Command that was in Warner Robins, Georgia, Robins Air Force Base. Even though I'd been a chief of police in Spain, really Robins Air Force Base was the first opportunity for me to be a commander. And I think most folks in the military, the dream is to be in a command position one day, to lead. And I had an opportunity to do that at Robins. And it had some very unique missions there. It was not just a logistics base where planes were brought in and worked on. We had a security mission there. We had a law enforcement mission there. But it was, I had a great and wonderful staff there. We did security clearance paperwork there. It's probably one of the toughest bosses I ever worked for in my military career. A guy that was just really taught me discipline, had high standards. And your first command position is always special. And with me, I did a flashback to that young man at Kinchlow. And I knew that at Warner Robins, Georgia, I had folks that someone, they ended up there through the Air Force. This is where they were going to be. And each one of those folks were someone's daughter or son, their most prized possession. And my main thing was to try to take care of my troops, but more so to concentrate and think about and pray about never letting me do anything stupid that would cost the life of one of my young men and one of my young women. Because once or twice in my military career in the Air Force, I've had to go knock on a door and tell a mother, a grandmama, or a wife that their son or daughter's not coming home. And, those young men and women are the dreams of families. And being a commander is an awesome responsibility, rewarding, but you cannot have a mediocre day. You got to give it everything you got every day there. And so to be able to command, to turn a unit around, to get great inspections and and be evaluated with great marks, and to one day, if you ever had to go from training into a wartime environment, would it work, and would your folks be ready to do that?
And you talked about getting good marks and everything. What was a day like there? What did you do? What was your mission? What went on at the base there?
Well, we obviously had a big law enforcement base. We had a lot of civilians that worked on a base like that, a logistics command base, or in this case, this particular one, probably 3/4 of the population are civilians that work on aircraft and come on and off your base. Mm-hmm. A change, different. So we had a lot of law enforcement. We had some resources that were at that particular base at that point in time that had a worldwide mission. So we had an aircraft area that we did a security duty with, mm-hmm. and that was a different priority, and required different levels of security, and had very good relationships with our law enforcement officers in downtown Warner Robins, and we worked very well with the community. So we had a law enforcement mission, mm-hmm. but in certain areas of the base you would have a security mission that were off the roadways and back in neat strategic places, and you had those two missions, and your security mission was one that were regulations and designated by lines, and this is what you could do and what you couldn't do, and it was all done with a little bit of a different enforcement. And so we had an opportunity. We had military working dogs there. I love working with military working dogs. Mm-hmm. Early on when we started, we had attack dogs, and once you sicked the dog on somebody, you couldn't get the dog off. They couldn't come back. Mm-hmm. And then we trained dogs that were attack dogs, but you could call them off, or bomb dogs, or mm-hmm. or dope dogs. And so we had just another full mission there. A lot of resources, firing ranges, and those kind of things. Because of that unique mission there, we had deployment teams that could get called at any one time, and that would be deployed anywhere in the world should any kind of crisis arise.
Okay. And talk about the interaction. You said the majority of the people working on the base were civilians. What was the interaction like with the community? Did you have like community events or anything like that? Ways that the military gave back or anything like that, and the community gave back to the military?
Absolutely. Well, I think the community knew and enjoyed the fact of the job opportunities that many military installations bring to a small town. Mm-hmm. We would have, back in those days, opportunities and events where we would open the base, certain areas of the base, and we would have a base open house. At this particular base, we had Guard and Reserve there. And we would just have an open house, and we'd have people come out. We had housing areas. We had all kinds of opportunities where we played sporting events. We had a museum on the back side of the base there. So that particular base was very, very involved. Tremendous there, an Airforce Association club. And many of these towns, somewhat like Clemson today, mm-hmm. Clemson University and the city of Clemson have a town gown. Well, in many small towns that have military installations nearby, they have a civilian counterpart, city, and military base council. And I mean, both enjoy each other's company.
Great. Okay, so moving on from Georgia, where did the military take you? Well,
the next piece after being my first command position, then something happened, and I had an opportunity to go with my men and women to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And that's the opportunity when you've trained for so long, and probably at this point in my military career, I'm guessing I was about 15 years in. All this training you've been doing, does it really work? Does the stuff on paper work? And so one of my teams got deployed to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and I had an opportunity to go with them. And had an opportunity to basically tell my family that I was going to deploy. Didn't know exactly the location I was going to that time, didn't know when I'd be back. Mm-hmm. It was the one time in my life that I left my Clemson ring behind. You just never know. And it turned out that we left early one morning on a KC-135 tanker aircraft with a team of my security forces. Tanker aircraft loaded down, used every bit of the runway, lifted off, and we did not land again until we got into Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Non-stop flight.
It's a long flight.
And once we got there, we thought, well, I guess we're in Saudi Arabia and we're at Jeddah. And the aircraft doors flung open, and it was the hottest air I've ever felt hit me in the face when we arrived in Saudi Arabia. It was in August. I think it was of 90. We were there early. To now take a group of men that you've been working with, and then to see almost 400 security forces people come together from all different commands. Oh boy, you're talking about an excitement time and a period of time where your tension level goes up. It would be battle-like today taking a place like Atlanta Hartsville Airport, landing at that base, setting up defensive fighting positions and security barriers, working with the local police and security forces, in this case the Saudis, setting up defensive fighting positions, moving in all kinds of aircraft, figuring out parking locations and where you're going to put them, building special facilities outlying to the base where you had to store your supplies and munitions or whatever you might have needed according to your mission, having 4 or 5 living locations that you had to take the troops on and off to. Hadn't seen many places in a manual that looked like that. And so after about the first week, we discovered we had to pretty much start from ground zero. Wow, what an opportunity to go in there. Tremendous support from the Saudis. Felt like that we were there and needed to be there. We were doing what we were asked to do. Troops and people from all over the country were coming in and blending everybody together. We had bombers and we had refueling aircraft. It was just a sight to behold. And I remember again, I go back to that young man at Kinchlow Air Force Base, and I remember we were setting up the base there, and 3,000 body bags, empty body bags. We had a military hospital there, and I kept thinking, Lord, what is this going to be? And Lord, protect us and our troops, and again, help me make the right decisions. And I remember on a mid-January night when it looked like it was a go. I've never seen anything like it. The aircraft that were lined up to go accomplish their mission. The eagerness of the troops. It wasn't a situation where you had to tell anybody twice about what you needed. Everybody knew it was a real thing. Everybody knew it was go. Everybody knew there could be Scud missiles. Everybody knew that this could be dangerous. Everybody knew that we were in a foreign country. It was go time.
Excuse me.
It's all right.
Goodness. Thank you.
Carry it everywhere I go.
So,
Got me choked up.
Talk about, goodness gracious, about the feeling when you got on the base, with the tension. You know, you said everybody was getting excited for the first mission. What was it like? I'm sure you had several branches of the military working together. How was it? How was the interaction with that? Was there any pushback from one versus another?
There was never any pushback. I think you have pushback maybe sometimes when you're out training or doing exercises. I think everyone accepted the fact that this was not a training exercise, that somebody could get hurt. I think everybody accepted the fact that, you know what, we had to trust on each other, lean on each other. There was actually a team there that I didn't talk a lot about, but they came in from near Shaw or Columbia, South Carolina. And there was a bunch of Gamecocks on that team. And I met them at the flight line when they came in and immediately told them I was a Clemson Tiger. But I told them that I thought Tigers and Gamecocks would make anything happen. And pulled them into my inner circle. Great young men and women. Guard, reserve. It was go. It was go time. And if you're in the military, you train to be ready to do that. And it was a privilege to see how things went in that environment. because everybody took it very, very seriously. And to have the support of the Saudis at the time when we were there, to be given the resources we needed to do their job, and never, ever had any kind of kickback. There were some things that you have to deal with from time to time, because there were folks that never thought they would even have to do those kinds of things, and so you took action if you had to, because every person was important. And in the security business, you can get hurt. And we're the first line on those kind of things, and so we just set that standard that high, and couldn't have been prouder.
Great. And talk about going on. How many missions? What was the biggest mission there? Maybe not your unit, but maybe another unit, and dealing with those people before or afterwards.
Well, the biggest mission there at the time at that particular base was an air refueling mission. Tankers, refueling anything that flew. It was a mission where it was a rear operating location, which meant that if people had medical emergencies or anything like that, that those situations and those casualties were sent back to our location for treatment. It meant that another part of the mission was we had bomber aircraft there, and I mean the things I saw for those 6 or 8 months I was there. I don't know where they went every day, but I did not want to be on the receiving end of some of those things I saw leaving and coming back into. So it was a large base where medical capabilities were, a large base where we supplied air refueling capabilities to folks, and it was a close air support bomber environment there. It was also a port of call for Navy ships that came through. Boy, we had to watch out for those Navy people when they finally hit land and came in. But a lot of good resources there, and everybody was ready for the task.
And what kind of planes did you have there? What kind of bombers?
There were B-52s.
B-52s?
B-52s heard all kind of stories. There were KC-135s, 2 stories. One, I've never seen it before, and some people may have remembered it when they watched some of those things then, but we had a KC-135s. They're being replaced now. We have aircraft in the Air Force today that are a lot older than some of the folks serving in it. 4 engines. And I believe it was on the left side. Something happened, but on the left side of the aircraft, the inner engine fell off, slid down the wing, knocked the outer wing, engine off. So this aircraft was coming in with 2 engines on one side. Got everybody pretty excited. The crew was actually crew that was actually airline pilots. Never seen a better landing in my life. They brought that thing in with 2 engines on it. And that was a disaster averted. Another time, I remember a B-52 crew coming back from a mission one night. And I never seen a group of older men run any faster, because that thing landed and it was leaking like a sieve. And I remember the conversations about, whoa, I saw the missile go by. It was a surface-to-air missile. I read the word on the side of the missile. And it went by and later detonated, but thank God it wasn't close enough to actually be terminal to the aircraft. But it caused some damage, and they called in and said, "We're coming in and we're in a mess." And they brought it in and landed, and we got everybody out and got them out of the way, and just a great job. I had an opportunity to go up on a refueling mission and take a look at the sandbox over there, and it was just about like you look at a table that's covered in sand. There's no place to hide. You take a bunch of toys, you make all these tracks and go around and doing all these things. And I mean, wow, it was quite an environment for an Air Force, and it was a target-rich environment. And the work that was done between the Army and the Air Force and all the other services was a great jointness. It was an absolute honor and a privilege to see it work.
And what intrigued you the most about the operations there?
What intrigued me the most was that the ability, when the time came, that while some of the plan may not work exactly like you had really evaluated it and practiced it all those years, that you could take it and the ingenuity of the folks, if you kind of stand back and let some of them do it, when it hits the fan and it's time to respond and we're not exercising and people can get hurt, is the way they go about that task and that mission. And the ability, even though there's a lot of rivalry between our nation's military, when it comes down to it, I've had my hind end saved many a time by Army, Marines, and I mean, we look out for each other. It's a brotherhood. And that was the most awesome thing, I think, to know that our nation was behind us, to come back, and to know that we came back with everyone we left and got there with. We had a few wounded, but we came back with everyone. And I never was prouder to come back and with those men and women, and to be received back as we were then. And I'll never forget the feeling when you come back and you land and you hit American soil for the first time, and the heat and the living conditions that were over there, that we were glad to do and endure and do our job. But we take so many things for granted, but be able to come back and do that. And I want to read you something.
Sure.
I've never heard my father tell my mother that he loved her, but I know he did. And I just want to read you something.
Go for it.
I got one note from my dad when I was over there, the old crusty Navy guy, and I'll read it just the way he wrote it. But it was in October, or it was in November of '90, and he said, "How is everything? Thing about the same around here. The weather is cool off. We have had some frost. It cool off some over there, have it not? Well, they say no news is good news. We hope to see you soon, really soon. Love, Dad." And I've kept this note for my entire life, and that's the first time I ever heard him mention the word love. And it's the first time I ever saw my dad break down when I returned. And those are things in life that mean everything. And I think that I have sons and daughters now that are serving. Some serving as teachers, some serving as coaches, some serving as mentors and guidance counselors to students. One of which has decided to serve in our nation's military. But there's a bond there, and to know that my role model had taken the time to write a note and to tell me that meant everything we went through was all worth it. And it's a note I'll keep forever. So coming back from Desert Shield, Desert Storm was an honor. We felt like we had accomplished our mission and did it together in a very unusual environment. And so I came back waiting to see where my new assignment was going to be, and off I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And what was, real quick while we're still on Desert Storm,
Sure.
What was the hardest part about that? What was the worst part about that mission?
The worst part for me, and I think for my troops, don't worry too much about yourself. You worry about your family back home and how are they, and you worry about them worrying about you. A lot of times you can't make contact with them. You worry about your mom and your dad, and you just worry about things that you can't control. And the least thing that many of my folks wanted to worry about was the people that were there. And that's the biggest thing you worry about the unknowns. For me, it was I don't want to do anything that would bring discredit upon my command position and cause anything to happen to any one of my people.
Okay. So you moved on to Albuquerque. Talk about that.
Well, I guess they figured when I came back from Desert Shield, Desert Storm, that maybe I could go to the Airforce Security Police Agency out in Albuquerque, which at the time was connected to D.C., and help and look at and write and redesign, remodel ground defense force plans, look at our base plans, and see what was going on there, and just to do a look across the world about all of our resources and how we do it, because it was a unique environment in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And to be out there working with the hierarchy of the security police agency, I felt like, well, boy, I've really arrived now. I've come a long way from Kinchlow. I've come a long way from Waupee, and ended up in the Air Force Inspection Safety Center on a base. More travel. Did some things with a lot of units coming in. Did a lot of things with security force units across the country, but had an opportunity to work on a staff and really go through and look at designs and plans and see kind of did we need to change our training and those kind of things.
And what did Desert Shield, Desert Storm teach you afterwards that you all applied towards this mission?
Think outside the box, and a lot of times you will not always be training in an environment that's either in the jungle or in a tent or out necessarily in a desert. Maybe you'll be in a town, or maybe you won't be in a military base and you'll have to go into an airport, because there are a lot of places you can and can't park aircraft. And so it taught us flexibility. It taught us about how to work through host nation agreements and what goes on when you go into a country. It talked to us about mobility. It talked to us about being ready. Probably at that particular point in time, we were worried a lot about chemical and biological warfare. And it talked a lot about being ready.
Okay. So, in New Mexico,
you can cut this out.
okay.
Oh, wait a minute, don't start yet, because she'll be coming up here shortly. Can we turn it off for just a second, or
Yeah,
did
we
you
can.
mess it up or turn it off? You gonna leave it running?
Leave it running.
Should I tell you a joke about now?
You can tell me a joke if you like.
I figured we'd be done before she got here. That's the garage door.
Okay.
Is it going kind of like you hoped it would be?
If you want, you can go ahead and keep on going about New Mexico.
And so Albuquerque was just another aspect to really come in and meet a lot more people, to play a very active role in how defense force plans were organized. Had a lot of folks that I had met in the Desert Shield, Desert Storm environment that we brought in for more consultation. It was just an opportunity to come back, and people really wanted lessons learned, and it was an opportunity to add a little more flexibility to what we were doing.
Okay. And what was it like to deal with some of these higher level servicemen, generals and that kind of thing? What was that like for you?
It was. I usually try to feel like I can work for anybody, get along with anybody. I think by and large, most people have one mission in mind, and that's the health, morale, and welfare of your troops, and to perform your mission to the best of your ability. And whatever it is your mission is supposed to be, I can do it anytime, anywhere. And so I never, worked hard myself. I tried to always lead by example. As long as I felt like I was doing that and understood what my responsibilities were, no problem, I can do it.
Okay. So, anything else you want to touch on about New Mexico?
No, New Mexico was a great opportunity. From there, I had an opportunity to go to Air War College and kind of do a little more with the educational part of my life there. But from Albuquerque at Kirkland and Air War College, an opportunity came that was really my first formal joint operations, joint service command, and that was to go work at Air Force Special Operations Command in Tampa, Florida.
All right, tell us about that.
I'd almost have to kill you, but
okay. What you can tell us.
Well, I learned a lot about joint operations. I learned a lot about special forces. I learned a lot about teams that are either there or not there. I learned a lot about Marines. I learned a lot about the very special niche in the military. I had the privilege and the honor to work for the guy a guy named General Hugh Shelton,
Mm-hmm.
4-star Army general who happened to be from North Carolina State. And believe it or not, we hit it off. A great guy, a great mentor to troops. Always stopped every morning and talked to my young people that were the security guards there. I had Army and Navy and Marines working for me there. The capabilities of that special niche in our United States Air Force is unbelievable. And the professionalism and the drive that command has is unmatched anywhere in the world. I went from a blue assignment, Air Force blue, to a purple, green, blue, tan, just to see what you sometimes hear about goes on in those worlds. We upgraded facilities. We spent money on boats and on pop-up ballards and reinforcing facilities, and just looking at, in the deepest, darkest places we have, and look at our tactics and looking at the training we provided, and our physical reinforcements and things that we needed to do, and the capabilities there. Back, it reminded me a lot of my first Strategic Air Command mission. When you go into that kind of command, you really can't, your security leaks, your things you work on, your plans, the security clearances that you maintain there are absolutely must have. And that capability is just is something that's very much needed, and it just opened up a new realm for me. And to have the privilege of working with General Shelton and the rapport he and I had, it was one of the best assignments I'd ever had in my life.
And I'm not sure how much you're able to talk about it, but what was what was the biggest challenge for that? And at the same time, what was your favorite part of serving there?
Well, the biggest challenge was actually talking a universal language of not only Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, but to talk that universal language of special operations, and to learn the capabilities, to learn the taskings. That was a challenge. Had it not been for my boss, I don't know how it would have worked out. But we had fun times. I mean, we had dining outs that were just absolutely wonderful. We had softball games, general officers that we put in the plate, and I mean pounded, and we had some great times together in intramurals, and challenging Central Command was also at this location. We had opportunities where we did physical fitness, and at that point in my military career, I was probably in the best shape I ever was in my life, because we ran everywhere. We went in formation. We hollered Jody calls. We'd run for miles. It was just a lot of camaraderie there. Had an opportunity to jump out of a helicopter. I didn't. Just opportunities like that. But it was the challenge of learning all the ins and outs, which is sometimes a very dark world, to also intermingle State Department and other capabilities and other resources we had, and to see the people that come through and be mindful of the missions that we were looking at it was a challenge to kind of pull all those together and recognize and do something with something that may or may not be there and that the public knows nothing about.
And are there any missions that you're able to talk to about that?
None I can talk about, but I do remember one that I thought we were going to have a mission one day when on my desk all 4 of my phones went off at one time, and I thought, oh Lord, this must be something. And I jumped up and went outside, and a general officer had 1 star had come into our building area, and the driver had come through the entry point, but didn't wait long enough, and one of the pop-up poles, bollards, had caught the brand new vehicle that the general officer was in, and did what it was supposed to do, and stopped the vehicle in its place. It was a brand new military vehicle, airbag deployed, hit the general officer in the face, broke his nose, blood everywhere, and I'm thinking, we're either going to war or I'm fired. I don't know which is the case. the general went up to my boss's office, General Shelton at the time, and this general was from North Carolina, and he was not happy. And the 4-star basically told him, well, you're the guys that helped design some of this stuff, and we got all this stuff because some of your folks came here and said we needed to increase it. And the general said, okay, we patched his nose, and it was fine. That was a memorable experience. And General Shelton may never excuse me for this, but I have it from a reliable source that there was a Clemson tiger paw flag that one day mysteriously appeared on the general officer flagpole outside of that headquarters building. And I'm getting very, very close to solving the crime about who put that tiger paw flag up on his pole. And one day I'm going to be proud to call General Shelton and tell him I finally solved that crime.
Okay.
That was another
It's an
exciting
interesting security assignment.
It was, yeah. And I'm almost about ready to, I think, come up with a suspect.
Okay. So, moving on, is there anything else you want to touch on about that operation?
Moving on to, that opened an opportunity for me, and it was the first time probably in my 28 years, 3 months, and 16 days of where I said, I'm going to ask for an opportunity and see. I always want to go back to Clemson. I'd like to go back to where it all began for me. And I talked to my boss at that time. He wanted me to go to NC State ROTC. I said, I'm fine with that. I can show up in orange coveralls if you want. But he arranged for me to go back to Clemson. Okay. And for the last 4 years of my military career, I was back at Clemson, recruiting young men and women for the United States Air Force. And in October when I retired, I had Colonel Newt Tyndall, who was the professor of aerospace studies at Clemson when Cadet Edge came. He retired me on the same stage at Tillman Hall that I was commissioned on. Very, very special for me. And it brought me all back center circle about where my roots had begun. It was very disheartening to see 9/11 after I'd worked so many years of trying to keep security and enforce things, and you worry about things happening at home and what have I accomplished, and that was a shock. And even this week, where we've learned about the recent tragedies in Boston. I mean, those kind of things happen, and so it was a real honor and a privilege to come back and be allowed to finish my career at Clemson, and to be retired by the gentleman that brought me into the Air Force.
Definitely. And I'll give you a chance to talk about Clemson. What's been the best part about it? And
everything. Clemson is, I didn't care whether I went to Michigan or New Mexico or behind a sand dune in Saudi Arabia. You always run into someone that says, I went to Clemson. And so that was real special for me to come back and do that. And it was an honor and it was a privilege. And then to try to, in some way, influence young men and women in their early stages of their life to prepare them for a military career. So it's been a heck of a ride. It's been a great ride. I've learned a lot. I've tried to stay grounded to my tobacco sticks, to my heroes, my father, to my father-in-law. I called him Granddaddy, Mr. Nobles, who served in World War II and in Korea. And he always remarked, he was in the Army, and it was awful much, it was a real pleasure for him to have a colonel serve him at supper and fetch his tea and all that. But I just hope in some way to my children and to the young men and women that I've served with, and to my family and to my wife, that I've fought a good fight. I've given every day everything I could. I come back and I think about folks at Clemson, Colonel Ben Scardon, a Bataan Death March survivor. Nothing compares to the sacrifices he had to make. Rudy Anderson in October of 1962, when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. When I was 13, I came back and discovered Rudy Anderson was from Clemson University and was a lone casualty in the Cuban Missile Crisis. A crisis that could have broken out into all-out nuclear war. And, these folks went to Clemson. These folks sacrificed. Jimmy Dias, our nation's only recipient of the Carnegie Medal and the Medal of Honor. What great stock.
Mm-hmm.
There is something in these hills. There's something about Clemson. But when Desert Shield, Desert Storm came, even Clemson and South Carolina worked together for the betterment and protection of everyone and accomplished the mission.
Mm-hmm. And I know you've been really involved in the school. Talk about your involvement with any sort of veterans organizations. Have you kept in touch with people that you served with in the past, that kind of thing?
Well, you always keep in touch with your friends that you served in before. Life is about passion and service. I've served in one area of my life. I'm still serving. I have a passion about pretty much anything affiliated with Clemson. But I've had the privilege and honor of serving with the Clemson Corps to raise scholarship monies. I've had the privilege and honor to work on the beautiful and solemn Scroll of Honor down by Memorial Stadium, and the Scroll of Honor Park is there. And to see Military Heritage Plaza come up at the Bowman Field, and to be involved in bringing back traditions at Clemson, Cocky's funeral and the burying of the Gamecock, and just to be able to serve in the place where you've met so many people that have been asked to sacrifice so much.
Mm-hmm.
To be lucky to come back and do what I do for those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. Freedom isn't free, and it's not for everybody. But you can serve. You can serve by by being doesn't have to be in the military to serve. You can serve in public service. You can serve interviewing veterans and maybe somehow trying to preserve some of our heritage and history. But it's about service, and you serve until the day you die. And it's just it's an honor to be able to find something that you can be passionate about and serve.
Mm-hmm. And talk some about how your wartime experiences have affected your life and what kind of life lessons you've brought back from them.
Well, my wartime and peacetime and all my missions of service in the military taught me many things. Never take anything for granted. You spend a lot of times away from your family and your loved ones. You miss things with your children. You miss things with your parents. Never miss an opportunity to tell them you love them. Never miss an opportunity to tell them how much of an impact it made on your life. Never miss an opportunity to be thankful for what you have. Take every day as a blessing. And on your worst day, you're blessed. And so those opportunities and things have taught me all those things in life. And I have a flag outside in my yard today, and I'll fly it till the day I die. And I fly that flag in honor of my father and of Mr. Nobles, and my son who's serving, and all those who've served before. And we live in a great nation, and we've been blessed, and we continue to be blessed. And for which much is given, much is expected.
Yes, sir. Anything else you'd like to add?
Absolutely. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. All right. Colonel, it's been an honor sitting here with you today, getting to hear your story. We appreciate so much your service to this nation, to Clemson, to everyone. Thank you, sir.
My privilege, and I appreciate what it is you're doing, and my privilege. It was my blessing to have been able to do what I have done and what I am able to still do.
Thank you.
Thank you.